Have you ever wondered what really happens to our soul in the first few months after we leave this world? The answer may shock you and completely transform your view of death and the life that follows. While most people believe that death is either an end or an immediate transition to paradise, the reality documented by Allan Kardec through rigorous mediumistic research reveals a far more complex, and in many cases disturbing, truth. At this very moment, millions of souls who disincarnated months or even years ago still wander completely lost, not even realizing that they have already died. They continue trying to communicate with family members, visit their former homes, and remain attached to a reality that no longer exists. But this is only the beginning of a journey that can be extraordinarily beautiful or terribly distressing, depending on how each person lived their last incarnation. What you're about to discover goes against everything you've been taught about the afterlife. You'll learn why some spirits beg to reincarnate under seemingly terrible conditions, why reunions with loved ones don't always happen, and how your daily choices are determining exactly what you'll experience when your time to leave this world comes. Prepare yourself for a revelation that may change your life today. Because understanding the truth about the early stages after death isn't just information. It's knowledge that can transform every decision you make, every word you speak, and every action you take. Your future soul will thank you for discovering this now. While there is still time to change your spiritual destiny, there is a reality few dare to speak of, but which Allan Kardec documented with precision through his mediumistic communications. The human soul, upon disincarnation, does not immediately awaken to its new spiritual condition. This truth, as disturbing as it may seem, reveals itself as one of the most common experiences in the spiritual plane. When the final breath leaves the physical body, consciousness does not extinguish like a candle being blown out. On the contrary, it remains active and vibrant, carrying all the memories, sensations, and attachments cultivated during the earthly journey. Here lies the first great shock. The soul still feels alive, whole, endowed with all its senses, but something fundamental has changed. The mediumistic reports collected by Kardec show us spirits that, even a year after death, still wander through places they frequented in life. They walk familiar streets, visit their old homes, and watch over family members, not understanding why no one sees or hears them. This confusion is not a flaw in death, but rather a natural consequence of excessive attachment to material life and a lack of spiritual preparation during physical existence. The most touching of these accounts are those in which the newly disincarnated soul remains by its own grave, in anguished and unnecessary vigil. It believes its true self still resides in that place, in the mortal remains that once housed its essence. It's as if the person is trapped in an illusion, where spiritual reality has yet to break through the dense layers of material belief. This transitional experience can last days, months, or even years, depending on the degree of spiritual evolution the soul achieved during its earthly life. Those who lived solely for material pleasures, for the accumulation of wealth, or for the satisfaction of lower instincts, find it harder to accept their new condition. It's as if they wear a spiritual blindfold, unable to see beyond the limitations they themselves created. Kardec observed that these souls in transition often experience a kind of spiritual drowsiness, a state of semi-consciousness where reality blends with earthly memories. They relive their final moments over and over again in anguished repetition that keeps them bound to the past. Some even believe they are still sick, feeling the same pains that led to their death. Clear evidence of how the mind can create its own prisons. But there is something even deeper in this awakening process. The soul is not truly alone during this transitional phase. Higher spirits, spiritual guides, and even loved ones who have already understood their spiritual condition remain close, waiting for the right moment to help the soul become aware. However, this help can only be offered when the soul itself becomes receptive to its new reality. The time needed for this awakening varies greatly. Some souls, spiritually prepared through study, prayer, and a life dedicated to goodness, make this transition almost instantly. Others remain in a state of confusion for periods that extend far beyond what our earthly minds can comprehend. And it is precisely at this point that the spiritual journey reveals its first great lesson. The death of the body is merely the beginning of a new phase of learning, not the end of our conscious existence. When the soul finally awakens to its spiritual condition, a process begins that Allan Kardec described as one of the most transformative experiences of existence: the confrontation with one's own truth. This moment doesn't come as an external judgment imposed by higher forces, but rather emerges naturally from the soul's own consciousness, now freed from physical limitations and capable of perceiving with unparalleled clarity. The superior spirits who accompany this process do not appear as harsh judges, ready to condemn or absolve. They present themselves as compassionate mentors, whose presence radiates a light that makes any form of self-deception or dissimulation impossible. In the face of this spiritual luminosity, the newly awakened soul begins to see its earthly life from an entirely new perspective, where every action, every thought, every intention is revealed in its purest essence. It is at this moment that many disturbing realizations begin to surface. Acts that seemed noble during physical life reveal selfish motivations, hidden even from the individual themselves. Gestures of apparent generosity prove to be laden with vanity or personal interest. Words that once sounded like absolute truths are unveiled as elaborate lies, not only to deceive others, but mainly to keep one's own conscience at peace. This process of revelation does not occur in a brutal or punitive manner. The spiritual guides lead the soul through its memories with infinite patience, allowing it to reach the necessary conclusions on its own. It is as if each life experience is revisited, but now under a different light, where the consequences of every choice become crystal clear. The soul perceives how its actions affected not only its own evolution, but also positively or negatively influenced the lives of all those it encountered. Many spirits report, through the mediumistic communications studied by Kardec, that this moment of truth is both liberating and distressing. Liberating because the need to wear masks and play roles no longer fitting their true essence finally ceases. Distressing because the magnitude of missed opportunities and mistakes made becomes undeniable. During this phase, the soul also faces the real impact of its omissions. Not only the actions taken are evaluated, but also those that should have been taken and weren't. Words of comfort that could have been spoken, help that could have been given, love that could have been shown. All of this becomes an integral part of the spiritual review that arises naturally. The more evolved spirits explain that this review is not meant to cause suffering, but to promote the growth of consciousness. Every error acknowledged becomes a learning opportunity. Every failure identified becomes a step toward future evolution. It is through this process that the soul begins to truly understand the concept of spiritual responsibility and the interconnectedness of all lives. There are documented cases where this confrontation with truth provokes extreme reactions. Some souls, unable to accept the reality of their actions, take refuge in stubborn denial, creating around themselves a sort of mental barrier that isolates them from spiritual light. Others, by contrast, dive into such deep remorse that they are unable to forgive themselves, perpetuating a cycle of self-punishment that hinders their spiritual progress. But there is a third group, those who manage to find balance between the recognition of their mistakes and the acceptance of the possibility of repair. These souls discover that the true tribunal is not outside them, but resides in their own enlightened conscience. And it is precisely this discovery that prepares them to face the even greater challenges awaiting in their journey of spiritual purification. After the confrontation with spiritual truth, some souls discover a reality that goes beyond their worst earthly expectations. They find themselves in a region known by Spiritist scholars as the umbral, not a place of divine punishment, but a vibratory zone created by the very mental emissions of those who dwell there. 1 year after disincarnation, many spirits still remain in this region, trapped not by external chains, but by the invisible shackles of their own choices and mental states. The umbral is not an arbitrary creation of higher forces meant to punish sinners. It is a natural consequence of the law of spiritual affinity, where each consciousness gravitates automatically towards the environment that corresponds to its vibratory pattern. Those who cultivated thoughts of hatred, revenge, uncontrolled lust, excessive greed, or any form of moral vice during physical life find that these very elements become their surrounding reality in the spiritual plane. The mediumistic accounts collected by Kardec provide disturbing descriptions of this region. Souls wander through shadowy landscapes created by the collective projection of their tormented thoughts. Some remain trapped in obsessions that consumed them in life, repeating the same mental patterns that led to their spiritual degradation. Others gather by affinity, forming communities where vices are perpetuated and intensified by mutual influence. The most tragic aspect of this condition is that many of these souls don't even realize they have the power to free themselves. They believe they are condemned to remain in that state indefinitely, as if they were victims of an unchangeable fate. This ignorance keeps them prisoners of their own mental creations, clearly demonstrating how the lack of spiritual knowledge can unnecessarily prolong suffering. There are documented cases of spirits who spend decades in the umbral, feeding resentments against those they blame for their current condition. They cultivate plans of revenge, nurse ancient hatreds, and refuse to accept any form of spiritual help. When higher mentors approach offering guidance and rescue, these souls often react with hostility, preferring to remain in their known condition rather than risk the uncertainty of transformation. There are also those who become obsessors, seeking to negatively influence incarnated individuals who share their vices or moral weaknesses. They find a perverse kind of satisfaction in leading others into the same mistakes they made, an unconscious attempt to justify their own failures through their repetition in others. But not all inhabitants of the umbral are extreme cases of moral degradation. Many are simply souls who allowed themselves to be dominated by seemingly minor vices during physical life: alcohol, tobacco, gluttony, spiritual laziness. These discover that their apparently harmless habits created energetic dependencies that persist after the body's death, keeping them trapped in lower vibrational patterns. What is most striking in Kardecist studies about the umbral is the realization that remaining in this region depends entirely on the soul's own will. The moment it sincerely acknowledges its mistakes, accepts the need for change, and demonstrates genuine willingness to evolve, it immediately becomes receptive to the spiritual help that was always available. Compassionate mentors patiently wait for this mental openness, ready to guide the repentant soul toward higher spheres of learning. The process of liberation from the umbral usually begins with small acts of kindness or genuine moments of reflection on past errors. Some souls awaken upon witnessing the suffering they caused others, developing empathy where once there was only selfishness. Others find motivation in the example of higher spirits who descend into those dark regions on missions of spiritual rescue. However, there is an even more complex aspect of this umbral journey that few fully understand. Many times, the souls themselves request to remain in these harsh conditions as a form of accelerated atonement for their faults. They recognize that the suffering experienced in the umbral, though painful, represents an opportunity for faster spiritual growth than gentler methods of evolution. One of the most universal expectations among those who depart from this life is the reunion with parents, spouses, children, and beloved friends who preceded them on the spiritual journey. This belief, nourished by centuries of religious tradition and human hope, finds in Spiritist doctrine a far more complex, and at times painful reality than our earthly minds can anticipate. Allan Kardec, through his mediumistic investigations, revealed that reunion in the spiritual realm is neither automatic nor guaranteed, depending fundamentally on the vibrational harmony between the souls involved. When a soul awakens to its spiritual condition and seeks out loved ones, it often encounters an invisible but absolutely real barrier: the difference in spiritual evolution. Family members who dedicated their earthly lives to cultivating higher virtues, practicing genuine charity, and developing moral strength are found in higher spheres of spiritual vibration. On the other hand, souls still attached to vices, selfishness, or spiritual ignorance cannot rise to these more subtle regions. This separation does not represent a cruel punishment imposed by external forces, but a natural consequence of the laws that govern the spiritual universe. It's like trying to tune into different radio frequencies. Though they both exist simultaneously in the ether, they cannot connect due to vibrational incompatibility. The less evolved soul may even sense the presence of its more advanced loved ones, but this perception manifests vaguely, distantly, like a faint echo of a happiness that seems unreachable. The mediumistic accounts, documented by Kardec, present touching cases of newly disincarnated souls who remain close to the places they lived in, desperately waiting for the appearance of dear relatives who are already in higher planes. They cannot understand why those they loved so much seem to have abandoned them in their moment of greatest need. This misunderstanding generates additional suffering, intensifying the sense of loneliness and abandonment that already characterizes the early moments of spiritual life. There is also the inverse phenomenon, equally painful. More evolved souls who wish to assist spiritually unprepared relatives but find themselves limited by the very natural laws that prevent direct interference in individual learning processes. These superior spirits can only wait with infinite patience for their loved ones to develop the receptivity necessary to perceive their loving presence and accept their guidance. There are documented cases where the vibrational gap is so wide that the reunion, when it finally occurs, is partial and temporary. The higher spirit can briefly manifest to the less evolved one, but this meeting requires considerable energetic effort and cannot be sustained for long periods. It's as if two people were trying to speak through thick glass. They see and sense each other's presence, but communication remains limited and frustrating. Allan Kardec observed that many souls gradually develop an understanding of this spiritual reality. They begin to realize that the true reunion with their loved ones depends on their own moral and spiritual growth. This discovery becomes a powerful motivator for evolution, transforming love for family into fuel for inner transformation. Some spirits report experiences in which they were able to glimpse their loved ones at specific moments, usually during temporary states of spiritual elevation brought on by sincere prayer, acts of charity, or moments of deep repentance and inner renewal. These fleeting encounters serve as beacons of hope, demonstrating that the separation is not permanent, only temporary. The most moving aspect of this reality is discovering that true love does not diminish with vibrational separation. Loved ones in higher planes continue to send emanations of love and protection to those who remain in lower spheres, even when the latter are unable to clearly perceive this spiritual assistance. This love acts as a subtle magnetic force, exerting a constant beneficial influence that can accelerate the evolutionary process of the less prepared soul. However, an even deeper realization emerges from this experience of temporary separation. Many souls come to see that their earthly bonds, no matter how intense, were often based on superficial aspects of the human personality, not on the truly spiritual affinities that transcend incarnations. After passing through the stages of awakening, confrontation with truth, a possible journey through the umbral, and the experience of separation from loved ones, the soul arrives at an understanding that completely revolutionizes its view of existence. Reincarnation is not a divine imposition, but a precious opportunity for growth and repair. 1 year after disincarnation, many spirits have already developed enough clarity to recognize their limitations and imperfections, spontaneously arriving at the conclusion that they need to return to physical life to continue their evolutionary process. This discovery marks one of the most transformative moments in the spiritual journey. Souls that initially resisted the idea of leaving the earthly plane now understand that physical life is an irreplaceable laboratory for developing virtues that would be impossible to cultivate under other conditions. Patience tested by adversity, compassion developed through contact with the suffering of others, humility learned through one's own mistakes. All these essential qualities for spiritual evolution find their most effective field of cultivation in incarnated experience. The spiritual mentors who accompany this process explain that reincarnation functions as a system of perfect justice, where each soul has the opportunity to repair the damage caused to themselves and to others. It is not a punishment imposed from the outside, but an organic necessity of the conscience itself, which seeks balance and inner harmony. When a spirit sincerely recognizes the mistakes made in previous lives, the burning desire to correct them through new earthly experiences arises naturally. Many are surprised to discover that the choice of their next incarnation is not made randomly or authoritatively. More conscious spirits actively participate in the planning of their future existence, analyzing with their spiritual guides which experiences will be most beneficial for their growth. They study different birth scenarios, considering factors such as family, socio-economic conditions, health challenges, and opportunities for service that each option will provide. Some of the most touching accounts collected by Kardec describe spirits who literally beg for the chance to reincarnate under seemingly unfavorable conditions. Souls who once abused wealth in past lives ask to be born into poor families, where they will learn the value of honest work and simplicity. Those who are cruel to people with disabilities request to experience those same physical limitations in order to develop empathy and understanding. There is also the phenomenon of spirits seeking to reunite on Earth with those they harmed, and not to continue old conflicts, but to repair the damage through love and selfless service. Parents who abandoned children in previous incarnations ask to return as children of those same souls, offering them dedication and care. Those who betrayed the trust of friends seek opportunities to demonstrate absolute loyalty in the new relationships they will form. The process of preparing for reincarnation proves to be extremely meticulous and compassionate. Spiritual guides not only assist in choosing the circumstances of birth, but also prepare the soul for the challenges it will face. They strengthen areas of consciousness that need to be developed, protect memories that must remain dormant, and program encounters with other souls who will play important roles in the new earthly journey. Allan Kardec documented impressive cases of spirits who wait decades or even centuries for the ideal opportunity to reincarnate. They continue studying, serving in the spiritual plane, and purifying their mental emissions until the perfect combination of circumstances arises to allow the greatest benefit from the physical experience. This patience demonstrates the seriousness with which they take the responsibility of a new earthly life. There are also those spirits who volunteer for specific missions, accepting incarnations that involve great personal sacrifices for the benefit of others. They choose to be born in times of transition, in places of conflict, or in troubled families, with the goal of serving as instruments of positive transformation. These heroic souls give up more comfortable experiences to accelerate the spiritual progress of humanity. But perhaps the most extraordinary aspect of this phase is discovering that death and reincarnation are part of a continuous cycle of refinement, where each experience, no matter how painful, contributes to the building of an increasingly luminous and compassionate consciousness. The soul finally understands that there is no victimization in the spiritual universe, only infinite opportunities for growth through love, wisdom, and service to others. The great revelation of Allan Kardec's teachings is that you have the power to completely transform your post-death destiny through the choices you make today. Every act of genuine kindness raises your spiritual vibration. Every moment of sincere forgiveness frees your soul from invisible bonds. Every time you choose love over selfishness, you are building bridges that will connect you to higher spheres of existence. But here lies the real challenge. Do you have the courage to honestly look at your current life and identify what needs to be transformed? Do you have the determination to let go of vices, resentments, and mental patterns that could keep you imprisoned in the umbral for decades? Are you willing to seek reconciliation with those you have hurt, even if it requires swallowing your pride? Time waits for no one, and each day lost in spiritual trivialities is a missed opportunity for growth. Start today. Practice charity without expecting recognition. Cultivate uplifting thoughts even amid daily provocations, and dedicate a few minutes each day to reflect on the greater meaning of your existence. Remember, your soul 1 year after death will look back and evaluate every decision you are making right now. Will it be grateful for the changes you began today, or mourn the opportunities you let slip away? If this content touched your conscience and awakened in you a genuine desire for spiritual growth, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. We have much more transformative knowledge to share with you, because your journey of spiritual evolution deserves all the support and guidance we can offer. Your future soul will thank you for every step you take today toward the light.